What's going on, Summit Chasers, and welcome to this episode of the Summit Chasers podcast. Very excited for this episode. The day after Christmas, we have Deanna on the show. She's completely an open book. Her stories of resilience, triumph, failures, and then to really discovering who she is and what she's meant to do and who she is meant to be. It was incredibly inspiring. She has her own podcast called the Label Free Podcast, where she lays it all out there. She's an incredible inspiration for anyone who has put shackles and labels on themselves, but knows they are capable of so much more. Now, I don't need to make much more of an introduction for Deanna. So sit back, get your notebooks out, comment your takeaways below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Turn on your notifications, and please enjoy the episode. Anyways, I'm not saying that's what we're going to talk about. Who knows? We might talk about pit bulls the whole time. But first, let's just start there though, because that's what initially drew me to you. And again, it aligns so well with our main initiative at Summit Chasers, is just people who, like myself, don't have we don't have an MBA, right? We don't have the typical path to success. Whether it's they call it like street education or failure education, or just lucky as well in there. And then they kind of go through life and they have these big dreams. They're innovators, they're dreamers, but there's just like, I'm not supposed to, right? Yeah. So I don't mean to answer it for you. It's more of a segue for you. So where did the Label Free podcast, what was your goal? What's your goal with that?
I've been asked that question a lot lately. So my background, I've experienced a lot of abuse, a lot of trauma. I'm a human trafficking survivor. Did a lot of drugs. Had some abusive relationships. My father's a deadbeat. I got married. I was married before my husband passed away about 8 years ago, and I had to rebuild my life. And over the last, well, now it's been 5 years almost with the podcast, but 5 years ago, I did dabble in fashion design too. So my husband passed away. I had to rebuild my life. I dabbled in fashion design. And, I did my last collection for an event against human trafficking. It was a huge event in Chicago. And then I was like, okay, what's next? I was not going to continue to throw money out at fashion anymore. Like, I'll buy clothes. I'm a fashionista, but that is something, if you want to make a name for yourself, you have to have deep pockets. I just didn't have. So I got an article on how to start a podcast. I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what a podcast was. And I was just like, okay, I read it. I'm like, I think I'm going to start a podcast. Talked to my cousin, my best friend at the time. And I'm like, I don't know who the F I think I am. I don't know if I can swear, but I'm like, I don't know who the F I think I am. What's that?
All you want, go for it.
I don't know who the fuck I think I am, but I'm going to start a podcast. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm so tired of carrying around these labels that I've put on myself. Like, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm abused. I'm broken. I have trauma. Like, there's just so many, when you go through so many experiences in life that you can just take on. And not only that labels other people put on you. So when I became a widow, that was a real tough label to have. Like, I would tell that when I tried to start dating again, which it took me a while. It took me a while to start putting myself out there. Like, once I told him that I was married and he passed away, like, I was like, sign of the cross. They didn't want nothing to do with me. And I just thought that was very interesting. And then on the flip side, I had people men that we had done business with that were reaching out to me in very weird ways, asking me if I needed anything, but they had underlying intentions, right? They did not have good intentions. And so I was talking to my best friend, and we just came up with Label Free, to live your best life, live label free. And it was just like very freeing for me to start the podcast and I have no more skeletons in the closet. Like, all my shit's out there. Like, I'm an open book. I don't have to worry about anyone coming after me and trying to bribe me for something, because it's all out there. And I've learned over the last 5 years, as I've fine-tuned my craft, that this is a message that resonates with so many people. And I think that we live in a society where everything is labeled. It's very divisive, and it's just, people don't want that. They want to be accepted for who they are. They want to be, they want to be included, and they want to have forgiveness, right? And so, I've talked to so many incredible people over the last 5 years, and it's just, it hasn't stopped. I get like 50 to 100 people a week that want to be on the show. So it's like, it resonates with people very deeply.
Yeah. And that's amazing, and there's more people because, like you said, we're surrounded by highlight reels
Yeah.
nonstop. Like if I was just to go on to if you weren't so honest and open and vulnerable, which again, it's incredible, the short amount of research that I've even done, 2 or 3 hours, like I feel like I know you, right? Like you're very
Good.
honest. But for most people, like if you were to take some of that away and I was to look, I'd be like, oh, she's just a badass executive. She's probably just got there,
Yeah.
right? But we just we're so blind to what it took to get there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are they're almost ashamed of it. Like
Yeah.
they don't give their past credit for the
Oh, yeah.
resiliency, the skills, right? And I'll work with a lot of entrepreneurs, even myself, and they'll be like, "Well, I've never ran a company this big before, and I've never done this before," but they were great at sports. Like you were on a team. Like, how hard did you have to work to make that team?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
did you have to figure it out? Did you have to overcome some stuff? They're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, so you've done this before,
Yeah.
right? Just apply that
Different
to
pressure.
that.
Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. But so going back to the labels thing, because I think that's a super interesting topic because we give ourselves, or they're given to us, and then we buy into the labels. And if we give ourselves these labels, it almost like now we're in a box, and that box is very hard to get out of because we're just confined by that label. Like
Yeah.
I am a whatever. Like my own experience, I mean, I've had my own experience, we'll talk about that on your podcast, but is and one of the many labels I bought into for myself was that somebody, like, I had imposter syndrome.
Mm,
And it's interesting, like the word like syndrome applies like illness, something that I
right.
need to go in get a whole bunch of help or take pills for, right? So then now you're automatically, because you buy into the syndrome, like that label, I
Yeah.
feel like I'm like, well, until I get this fixed, I can't do anything else. But then I don't know how to get
I
it
don't
fixed
believe
because
in
it's
the
almost made
imposter
a.
syndrome. I don't believe in the imposter syndrome. And that's another just like label that people want to
Mhm.
put on things because they don't want to admit that they're feeling insecure or
Mhm.
what, that they don't feel, because I really feel like imposter syndrome is just a fancy word to like, I'm just insecure.
Yeah,
I'm, I'm,
100%.
I'm fearful. Like
Mhm.
these are two basic words that have been in our vocabulary forever. All of a sudden someone came up with imposter syndrome because they don't want to admit they're insecure, you know?
Mhm.
So I don't really believe in that term.
I don't
I'm,
either. And
no,
so I had one of my mentors, he put it to me perfectly. He's like, you don't have, like, you've been buying into this false thing. It's like two words that don't belong together. Like it
yeah,
doesn't make any sense. You're just not comfortable with your what did he say? You're not comfortable with what you can achieve, like with your
right.
abilities, right? You're just not comfortable with it yet, right? You just don't know how to use it yet, right? So that was super interesting. So for you, obviously, with your background, how did you get into, well, first of all, start from the beginning. How did you get out of where you were at? I'm gonna get vulnerable here for a second. How did you
Sure.
get out of where you're at? What was your first steps to kind of reinvent yourself?
Like in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So after growing up around seeing like my father being very abusive, and then I got into an abusive relationship, and part of that relationship was being exposed to human trafficking and drugs. But I also had the sense to start reading a lot. I started reading a lot of self-help books, a lot of like meditation, and
Mm.
I got myself into martial arts. It was good, and it was like a little bad in the beginning because once you start learning some of those skills, you're like, oh, I'm a badass, I can beat everybody up, and I'm still dealing with a lot of stuff, right? And so as I like continued down my path of being a martial artist, I'm a second degree black belt. So I, passed the badass phase more into like the, let's all love each other and be kind phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so then I just took myself to counseling. I found a counselor and I started just like processing, and I'm like, I wanted to change the narrative for my family and for myself. I did not want to continue the pattern because unfortunately, as I'm sure everybody knows, and that if you are raised in an abusive home, you continue, like you repeat the pattern. And
Mhm.
so I was just refused to continue to do that. I wanted to change my life. I wanted to change my trajectory. And I did. I set out to do that. I took a long time. I think I actually in my 40s is when I finally have no more daddy issues, right? I married an older man. He was 12 years older than me. I wasn't the best relationship. We were great partners in business, but he was very controlling. He was a steroid addict. He actually, that's why how he died. He needed his third kidney transplant because He just couldn't stop taking the steroids.
Mm.
Um, I definitely I married him because I had daddy issues. I did,
Mm.
totally. But he was also like my man, like my knight in shining armor came to me during a time which, I was really deep into doing a lot of cocaine. I was on a lot of benders, and he kind of rescued me from everything and, turned my life around. But then we became great partners in business. Then after like towards the end, I started growing like past him. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
started growing so
Yep.
much on the inside and becoming such a better person for myself that I grew past him, and he never stopped the steroids. And, that's something that we fought about nonstop. And, the last 2.5, 3 years of his life, it was him on dialysis. I had to push him in the wheelchair in the airport and just do all the things. And at that point, I knew like those daddy issues were gone, which is very
Mm.
interesting if you think about it. And just, it took a long time. I mean, 20
Mm.
years, maybe longer than that. Took a
Mm-hmm.
long time, to really
No,
get a
but
lot over
yeah,
life.
there's an interesting concept there. So the thing that got you, one of the things that got you out of that situation, out of that mindset, wasn't the thing that it wasn't your ultimate savior. Like you had to keep reinventing yourself.
Right.
You had to
Yeah.
keep growing and identifying that you keep growing because that's so cool. First of all, you got out of that one scenario into another that saved you from this initial one, but
Yep.
then you grew until that was a problem, and then you had to identify that, and then we keep
Yeah.
growing, and then as we grow, there's a ceiling,
Yep.
and sometimes we don't listen to that ceiling, and we keep hitting our head against it for a little bit too long, right? We
Yeah.
have to identify that ceiling and then grow past it. So that's
Yep.
super cool concept. So then after that, how did you so from there, your current success, how did you shift into being the badass that you are now?
Thank you for that. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of, after he passed, it took me a long time to really kind of just be happy with myself, just by myself. So I think a couple of years after he had passed, I just enjoyed really sitting in the peace of my home by myself and just
Mm.
in silence. I mean, because I was pretty angry for a while because he left me with nothing. I had to hire 3 attorneys because I had a lot of ownership. We had 5 businesses. So I had to hire 3 attorneys to fight the family. He had 4 daughters from a previous marriage. And there was a trust and just a lot of, he specifically disinherited me in the will. There was a lot of things that I had to go to battle for. And after like all that, the dust had settled, I just like really came to a place of gratitude and just wanting to choosing, and now people don't realize this, choosing to be happy.
Mm.
Because to be happy is a choice. You can't
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, you make me happy. This makes me happy." Like really, your happiness comes from within, and that was like I think that the last 5, 6 years of my life have been the happiest and the most just profound years that where I've just I found a lot of peace. And I try to wake up every day and be grateful for whatever is happening around me, because I feel like we get lost in like of like the what our expectations are supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be, like, oh, I should have this, I should have that. And you know I probably have the least I've ever had, but I'm the happiest I've ever been.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And do you feel like part of that is because, like, it seems, and again, correct me if I'm making a false assumption here. It seems like you've almost found, at least for now, your purpose. Like, it's something that you
Yes.
really can dig your heels into. And if I don't want to get up and do this, or you wake up and you're sick or tired or whatever, it's something that you can like, no, this is why I'm here right now.
Yeah, the podcast is definitely taking on a life of its own. And even when there's been times where I have felt like, oh, this isn't going anywhere, what's going on with this? How am I going to make this work? I've always had to come back to like the message. And the people that email me on a daily basis, thank you for what you're doing. The 5-star reviews that I get, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You speak to me in
Mm-hmm.
ways that are so simple for me to understand, and it's great for my personal development. Like these messages just reaffirm that I am on the right path and I need to keep doing what I'm doing. And it just also tells me that there are so many more people around the world that need to hear this message. I mean, I feel like COVID specifically really divided us as a society. And it really pinned people against each other in ways that I thought were completely unnecessary. And, if we can come to a place of unity, we are stronger together than we are divided. And part of my message is acceptance and love and unifying with
Mm.
each other, because we are all have like this really, we all have a story to tell. And once we allow ourselves to accept those stories that might make us feel bad about ourselves, but we find the strength in them and don't let any kind of judgment penetrate our walls, I think that's when we can really see how connected we all are together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's definitely something people can get behind, and that's something that people like even your audience, like they're like
Oh,
part of your community. Like your community can get behind that so strongly,
oh yeah, for
right?
sure.
And that's such a cool kind of place to be. So, are you when you had five businesses, first of all, you had
Yeah,
five?
yeah, we had five. Yeah.
What were those?
So we had a large remanufacturing facility in automotive. So we remanufactured transmissions. I had gotten a lot of my last contract I closed was for a total of $20 million over the course of 4 years. Then we had an installation arm locally for the transmissions. And then we had three
Mhm.
real estate holding companies.
So you guys are busy.
Yeah. We traveled 3 weeks out of the month. So nonstop.
Crazy. Good for
Yeah.
well, good for you guys. So so when you guys had those, did you found those like co-found those businesses together?
So I was with him for almost 17 years of my life. He had
Mhm.
a manufacturing business prior to us
Okay.
being married, but that one in the crash of 2008, if you remember the real estate
Hmm.
crash,
Yeah.
he lost that. He was like a guinea pig to the bank. They pulled his loan. And so
Mm.
I like when all that was happening, he was not really telling me what was going on, and we were only engaged. We weren't married at that point. And I fought with him one night, like until
Mm.
3 o'clock in the morning. Like, I'm coming with you to this meeting. This is my life too. He's like,
Hmm.
well, you can come, but I don't want you to say anything. So I'm like, okay, I won't say anything. So I go to this meeting. This was him like restarting, right? He's gonna restart under a new name. He lost everything, lost like $10 million. I stood by his side. And I negotiated during the course of us rebuilding, I negotiated our payment plans to people like vendors that had gotten stiffed from the old company. I had closed so many different contracts with Verizon, First Group America, which is all the yellow school buses,
Hmm.
First Vehicle, which is for like a lot of the police stations. I mean, a lot of contracts I got. And so he like at one point he told me, he's like, I underestimated you. I said, I know you did. Like, I know you did. And we just became a powerhouse of a couple in that industry with what we did. And so yeah, we were incredibly busy, but I can tell you, I don't know if it was worth it though. Like all we
Really?
did was work. We didn't really enjoy anything. We had the mansion, we had the Ferrari, we had the Mercedes, we flew private, but it wasn't enjoyable because all we did was work. I
Mm.
remember a lot of times I'd be walking, I'd get home real late and I'd walking to the mailbox to grab the mail. And I'm just like, I am so unhappy. I
Yeah.
don't think this is worth it.
Mhm. I think, and that's a lot of business owners miss that. They don't really define what they truly want. They define that I want a successful business, but
Right.
they don't know what that looks like for them.
Yeah.
So you guys wanted a successful business, but you didn't necessarily identify, oh, I also want to be able to travel. I also want to be able to not have heart palpitate. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
lot of that kind of stuff. And then some people do. Some people like that. They thrive in it, right? And I know some of those people, and I don't fully understand them. I'm kind of one of those too, but there's some where it's just outrageous. They're traveling 3.5 weeks out of the month, and they're just insane. So defining that. So is that something that you learned? Would you identify that as like a learning, like a lesson that you learn is to really, when I get into something, identify kind of how I
I
want my life
enjoyed
to be?
Yeah, I enjoyed the success of the things that I was capable of
Mm,
doing, because I surprised myself, getting that contract, all the contracts I got actually, like we get a contract with Greyhound for all their transmissions, other contracts with like MCI, which is all the motor coaches, you name it. We had incredible large contracts with people all over the United States and
mhm.
Canada. I think it was just like the grind and not being able to really sit down and fully enjoy it. And that could possibly be a real big that mostly fall on my late husband, because I don't think he knew how to really relax. I think that his fear of like losing it again
Mm.
kept driving him forward, where I would, and he was just so angry. He was so angry at the bank, so angry at all these people that that he blamed for the demise of his first business. And I'm just like, you have to let that go. Like
Mm.
you gotta let that go. Like, let's just move forward. Like, look at what we're building. We're light years ahead of where you were in your last business. We're gonna double that business in like what I think it was, so 2008, in like 5 years, which took him almost 30 years to build, 20 years to build. So like, let's just relax. Let's enjoy what we're accomplishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's huge, because then if you're so, I mean, again, you're putting yourself in another box of just your
Yeah.
paranoia, your fear of failure. Like you're almost doing it to not fail rather than to succeed. And
Yeah.
if you do that, it's you're always focused on the failure, but not what it looks like for you to succeed. And then you get stuck in this whirlwind of stress and constantly
Oh
holding
yeah.
grudges and burning bridges, and it's just not sustainable.
No.
All right.
Well, hence he's not here anymore.
And well, there's a case
I
in
don't mean
point.
to laugh, but
Case in point. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that'll be a soundbite.
Yeah.
So you shifted away from. Let me ask you this: would you ever get into like owning a bigger business? Like, would you ever want to scale what you're doing to that size again, or are you kind of? Would you say you're gun shy?
Well, I wouldn't want to do any type of manufacturing ever again. That's
Mm,
like way too much. Just well, and it was more. It wasn't. We weren't doing like OE stuff. It was all manufactured. So very
mm,
complicated. A lot of like parts had to be remachined, and like we had a standard BOM, build of materials, and so like it was just a lot. I would never want to do anything like that again. Would I want to scale what I'm doing today to reach a level that I'd be happy with, like, reaching 7 figures? Absolutely. I'm not against that. And I think that there's a way to do it, especially in this day and age, that I could do and enjoy myself at the same time. I mean, look, I'm talking to you right now on my laptop in Florida.
mm,
So like I think that there's a possibility to do what I do and scale it to a place where I could reach that level of success again, but I
mm.
don't, not to that crazy level.
Yeah,
I'm I'm not interested in that. Just something that I'm comfortable and I'd be able to retire comfortable and be able to pitch in with my husband, and instead of him being the breadwinner, I can actually pitch in some
yeah,
stuff too.
100%. I respect that. What advice would you give those that were they're in similar shoes as you were, right? They're working, like, basically they own a job, they own a very stressful job,
Yeah.
um, and they're not necessarily happy with what they're doing. They're stressed out all the time. They don't have any time. They feel like they're losing
Own a
time with their
job or own a
family.
business?
They own the business, but they, again, because they're so in it all the
Yeah.
time, right? And just so, like you said, whether they're traveling 3.5 weeks out of the year, or out of the month, I mean, or they're working 17-hour days, whatever, they're just miserable. What advice would you give them?
Hmm. I think thinking back, if they own a business and they have a team, you really have to have the right team in place. We did
Mm,
not have great people in place. I was hiring and firing nonstop just because we can never really get the right people to support the goals of the business, or we were just growing out um of their level of expertise. Like, right, we just kept growing and growing where maybe we outgrew them. So I think that if you have a business, the business is so that you have freedom to live your life the way you want to live. And so if you are constantly at mercy of the business and in that grind nonstop, then something's broken about your business, right? Either you don't have the right people, you don't have the right processes in place, you don't have the right, your financials are messed up. Where are you bleeding money? Because if you are successful and you mean, or they're a micromanager, then they're never they're gonna continue to spin their wheels. But there are so many things, especially in today's world, where you have so many like resources at your fingertips that you are able
mm,
to fix a lot of those things. Like, I mean, when our profit margin was at a certain level, things were just running smoothly and it was stress free, right? So
mm,
if something is eroding your profit margin and you feel like you have to constantly be in there micromanaging, you really need to figure out what that is, because you obviously are losing money somewhere that's creating this chaos for you to constantly be in that grind.
mm. Well, and I think, I mean, to your initial point, was having the right people around you.
Yeah.
right? And then
That's
you,
hard. That's hard.
and it's difficult, and a lot of, and I liked your other point that you made was you were growing past the people that
Yeah.
were on your team. If you have a, if you're a $5 million company and somebody who's, whether it's a sales manager or in your case, manufacturing, a plant manager, line manager, whatever it is, and you grow past a certain point and you grow past their current skill level,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like you have to be able to identify that proactively. And I don't think a lot of people do. I just think, oh, they're doing good for now, and then they don't notice that they're not doing well until they're
Yeah.
not doing well, and then all of a sudden, like you said, whether it's something in your P&L statement, or people are leaving because they don't like working for them,
Right.
whatever,
Other thing.
whatever it is, right? So so how do, if you're looking back then, or how have you learned to avoid that, to avoid, bring people in who can grow with you, and then how do you
Mhm.
make sure that they do grow with you?
Well, I mean, right now with what I'm doing, I have someone who just edits all my videos and all my content, and then I did have a booking manager that was taking all my intro calls, but I'm doing everything now because she's had some issues in her family life. I think that if I was needing people again, I would really just try to find someone that was as passionate about my message and wanting to support my audience and my guests the way that they are in alignment and they'd want to support them the same way that I would.
Mm.
So it's a completely different world for me now. I don't have 150 employees. I'm not managing a large P&L and a balance sheet. And, it's just a completely different,
Mhm.
I'm in media now, which is a lot different than manufacturing.
It's a lot. Well, it's a completely different way of leading,
Yeah.
right? Like you kind of, if anybody, if you haven't, or I would suggest if you read it, if you haven't, is Reed Hastings. I forget what it's called. Oh, his Netflix, kind of how he ran Netflix. He was the former CEO of Netflix. Like No Rules by Reed Hastings. That's
Oh,
what it's
okay.
called.
I like it.
And he kind of talks about the different types of leadership, and obviously with Netflix, like there was a lot of creatives on the
Mhm.
team, right? Everybody that they needed to have full bandwidth to create and come up with new innovations, and the freedom to fail too.
Yeah.
So the way you manage them was just, you don't necessarily tie a ton of compensation to them, because then they're so focused on the compensation, not creating and innovating, right? You overpay them, bring top talent, overpay them, right? And then you let them fail, support them as long as they can come back and say
Yeah.
why they failed, and here's how I'm going to improve next time.
Right.
But you let them create, right? And
Yeah.
that's how you lead them, is you push them, ask them questions, try
Yeah.
to
Oh,
facilitate.
yeah.
And then, but that's creatives. And then you go into a manufacturing plant
Yeah.
where, if anybody here is familiar with Six Sigma, right? It's like, I
Yeah.
think what's the optimal, it's like 99, like everyone says, like, oh, it's like 99% of the time we're good. Well, in manufacturing it should be like 99.996%
Yeah.
of the time, right? And
Yeah.
anything below that is not good.
Yeah.
Right, so
No.
it's very different types of leaders. You have to be very, you follow the process to the millimeter. And
Yeah.
then you have, in where you're at now, which is media creative,
Yeah.
right? But much more so, like you have to bring in people who are more.
But the common thread there though is whether it's manufacturing or creative, if you have a team, you should always ask them what tools they need to succeed. So
Mhm.
if they are, so that was my big thing with the people that actually I have a lot of women a lot of women and men that were part of my team in the manufacturing world that are leaders now. And they've thanked me for my leadership because, I was a great example for them and I'm humbled by that. So I always ask them, what can I do for you? What tools do you need from me to help you succeed more at your job? So am I failing you? Right. And
Mhm.
so I think as a leader, you have to take responsibility. How do you empower your team? And it's the same thing across, any industry. If you hired someone that you believe has the skill set to do the job and if they're not doing a good job, what do they need from you to make sure that they can do that job successfully? Because sometimes they are not giving them the right tools.
No, absolutely. And there was a great concept. I'd spoke to somebody about, I can't remember his name, where he said, as a leader, you always have to take responsibility for everything. Like everything has to be on you. And if you look at it that way, you can improve. So if you have somebody on your team, let's say you have a meeting, right? You're trying to push an initiative and they fail or they're off the mark,
Yeah.
right? First, you have to be like, okay, is the way I communicated, was it clear to them what
Right.
it was and how to achieve the outcome? Right. And then, was I clear? on the outcome itself, and then you have to look at the person and be like, okay, everybody can perform exactly how they should with what they currently have.
Right.
So did I set them up for success? Did I give them the tools that they needed? Did they have the right infrastructure? Did they have the right people around them? Did they have the right timeline? Right. And then if all of that is right, then you go back to, okay, did I just put somebody who shouldn't have been in that seat? But either
Yeah.
way, it's on you. It's on you
Yeah.
as the leader. Right.
Oh,
So you have to be able to identify down to, this is what we need to accomplish. Okay, I just put a bunch of people who aren't capable of accomplishing it. It's not their fault. I should have
right.
identified that,
Right.
right? So I need to either put them, if they're the right person culturally, let's put them in a different role, and that's fine, right? So it's always on you,
Yeah.
right?
Agreed.
As it should be. So I love that. I love that that's something that you embodied and admit to. I love
Yes.
that. So let's continue on. So now you have the podcast. What's kind of, I always ask this question, what's kind of the next summit that you're chasing right now? Like, where do you want to take this? Like, what's your vision of 5 years from now? What kind of new badass are you?
Well, I never thought I'd say this, but I would not mind being like a keynote speaker, but speaking about something that is in the realm of empowering people to live this label-free life, to
Mhm.
continue my brand. I have been in talks to take the show to reality TV. So I had a call with someone. They produce TV shows with networks all over, the world, and I had to submit my proposal for that. So that's still in the wings. And I just became an executive contributor to Brains magazine for the next 12 months. So I'm going
Ooh.
to be, my feature just was live last night. So now I can start contributing. So I've actually had a couple of conversations with with guests that I know that I want to feature in the magazine with their
Mhm.
subject matter. I had a guest on, he's a coach. He considers himself the kingmaker. And I love what that means. I think that we're in a world where like we are emasculating men, where the masculine is gone. Women have now taken on this masculine role, and it's like it's not balanced, and
Mhm.
so our conversation was really deep, and it was about like how these tides have changed and how do we get back to balancing it so the woman can lead with her feminine and the man can come back to his masculine. And
Mhm.
and like, I'm not sure about you, but I think we've seen a lot of what that has done to our society, where whatever, that's a whole nother conversation. So I have had these conversations, so I'm going to start writing articles around these people I've had these conversations with, and that message, how it resonates with me and how it kind of falls into like um the label free initiative and all that stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm currently, the next step for me right now.
No, I absolutely love that. And so I'm divorced. I had two kids with my ex. We have a great relationship. And then I met my now fiance, and she came, I don't want to speak too much out of turn because she can do this part of the podcast, but she came from a relationship where she felt she had to be the more
Yes.
masculine one,
Mhm.
right? And she was miserable, and she wasn't herself because she always had, again, she had to play a role that wasn't,
Yeah.
it didn't fit. Like she wasn't, again, she put herself in a box that she shouldn't have been in. And then when we got together, I had kind of a similar thing where I felt like I had to kind of suppress my drive and what I wanted to do, and my gusto, as my
Yeah.
mom calls it, right? And
Yeah.
then we got together, and then it was such a relief to, like, I can be the one to, I can drive, not literally, but I can drive forward. I can be
Yeah.
that, I can kind of be myself.
Balance each other out. So you
Exactly. And then
able to be with that vulnerable, lead with her vulnerable feminine side, which, to be
yeah.
honest, for myself, I've never felt safe enough in any relationship to ever lead with my feminine side until my now current husband. So it's
Mhm.
taken me over 40 years of my life to finally get to a place, because of being brought up in an abusive home. I felt like I had to protect myself. So I always led
Mhm.
with my masculine, always like this tough, strong, independent woman. And now it's like in this phase of my life with this man that I'm with, I'm able to feel more vulnerable and lead it from my feminine. So it is a beautiful feeling. Like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you, God.
Like there's a huge weight off your shoulder, and
Yes.
that's how, I mean, you can take it from her, but from what she says, that's how she feels too,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because she feels safe. And I think, I mean, that's a paradigm for many things. Like even in business, if you're in business with if you're a co-founder, if there's, if you're a throuple, so to speak, running a business, or you have like your key players on your team, right? They have to be comfortable to be there, to let their true skills,
Yeah.
inhibitions, goals, and dreams, be out there and drive towards it. Where I think a lot of, whether it's business owners or leaders in general, they try to hold that in. It's like, nope, pull that in. Like we just ROI,
Mm,
KPIs, like just
yeah.
this, as opposed to, okay, what do you actually want out of your life? Like, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
Even if your plans to move on here in 5 years, right? I want that for you. I want you to succeed and develop them towards that goal, because then they'll fight for you.
Yeah.
And if they can get behind, like you're unified. And that's one thing that I think so cool about what you're doing, is when you said you want to bring somebody in who's as passionate about your vision as you are.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to have a hard time finding that, because it's a great mission, right?
Yeah.
It's a great purpose. And B, it's so, like, just talking to you, it's so clear,
Yeah.
right? Like you could have this conversation all day
Oh yeah.
with 100,000 different types of people, and it would resonate the same, right? Because you're good at speaking as well. So to get good people buy into their vision, make yours really clear so they can buy into yours, and
Yeah.
you're gonna, again, that you're gonna be able to fall into your own, and then identify what your own is, and then something that's you're not your strong suit, hire for that.
Yeah.
And because
Absolutely.
you're so clear, you'll bring in good people. It's just kind of like this nice flywheel that we need to get into. But I absolutely love that, and I love everything you're doing.
Thank
um
you.
take a minute or two, pitch everything that you're doing, tell us where they can find you, anything you want.
I'm on all the things. So I mean, like I said, I'm a podcast host. I release Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. I'm on all the things, and I'm just here to uplift, inspire, and hopefully bring people together and let them know that they are accepted and they don't have to be ashamed of their past or maybe perhaps something they're going through right now. That there is someone out there that has gone through the same thing as you. You are not alone, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. So, label free podcasts, I'm on all the things.
Let's go. And definitely check her out. I listened to a few episodes. They're great. There was a guy on there, he was like an aging doctor. I can't remember
Yeah.
his name though, but it's a great content there. But anyways, it's some amazing stuff. And you want to get into keynotes, let's talk about that, because I do want to do some keynote collaborations and stuff, and we align pretty well. So
Yeah.
anyways,
Down.
I'll film the outro afterwards, so I'm just
Okay.
gonna talk shit until I stop. Thank you for watching this episode of the Summit Chasers podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed, you were inspired, you learned something that you can use to go and chase whatever your next summit may be. Be sure to like and comment your takeaways from the episode below. Also, follow us on all social media platforms under Summit Chasers Network. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to turn on your notifications so you can be notified when we drop new content like how-to videos, business best practices, motivation, and personal development strategies. And until next time, keep chasing your summit. I'll see you on the next one.